Hello, everyone, and welcome to September's Fic Night. I did not want to disclose this in advance, but it is going to be a surprise double feature because we had a tie between two of our great authors, one from Slytherin and one from Ravenclaw, in this month's voting. We were actually close to a tie between all three stories, which would have been cool for maybe our first triple feature, but also might have exhausted my vocal cords. So we will see. For those who don't know, our stream is I'm Kevin, aka Title Dragon, and our stream is from hpfanfictalk.com. This is our YouTube channel, and we would love you to subscribe so you can check out more Fic Nights and the content that we're going to push out. But hpfanfictalk.com is a website. Primarily, we started out as a Harry Potter directed website with a forum, and then we added an archive for people to post all of their fan fiction. But we have bloomed out, despite our name, into a multi-fandom archive, multi-fandom forum. So we've got a lot of people posting a lot of different stuff, and everybody is going to be welcome. As you'll hear from one of these challenges, it is actually set out as part of an original fiction challenge, which we also welcome on our archives. This month's feature is going to be first, No Mercy by our Slytherin author, Chris, aka Starbuck. And we will also read, this will actually be the first that we actually read through, is The Forest Cottage by our Ravenclaw author, MadiMalfoy, aka Maddie. And we are blessed to have Maddie with us tonight.
Hi, everyone.
And so what we're going to start with is reading through The Forest Cottage. And we're actually going to have the opportunity for Maddie to do some live Q&A with us after the reading's over, before we jump into No Mercy. So I invite anybody who is with us to go ahead and tweet at me personally on Twitter, of course, about any questions you would like me to ask. Anybody who's watching, I'll also be kind of keeping an eye at the stream of the channel itself, and we will try to feed those questions to Maddie once we get to the Q&A as well. So without further ado, we are going to go through The Forest Cottage by MadiMalfoy, an entry for Thea, another of our members, Narrative Original Fiction Challenge. Hiking through the nearby forest was a frequent pastime for those wanting an escape from their daily lives stuck in the metallic city. Most hikers went to the warm springs or the waterfall with the large natural pool that were just over a mile into the forest. A few went on the more difficult trails that had steeper, rocky terrain and unclear footpaths. These select hikers sometimes stumbled upon a half-hidden cottage if they were lost off the path. The cottage itself blended in with the surrounding trees and foliage. It was tucked between 6 large sycamore trees and was built from large logs into a simple A-frame house. They were small, rounded windows on either side of the door, with nearly overflowing flower boxes, and native flowers and bushes were planted all around the sides of the cottage, leading to the good camouflage. A small chimney poked through some of the upper branches of two of the sycamore trees, occasionally releasing small puffs of smoke into the air above the tree line, before dissipating with the ever-blowing breeze. Once the hikers were invited inside, they always agreed how cozy and welcoming the cottage was to their host. The inhabitant of the cottage seemed normal enough for someone who lived alone in the woods, if just a bit aggressive about making the hikers some tea. The tea was always fresh and the perfect temperature for sipping, and made them all feel better almost immediately. Soon enough, the hikers were ready to leave the cozy forest cottage and return to the city of metal from which they'd came. However, as soon as they were out of direct sight of the cottage, it left their memory as if it had never happened, even to those who had ventured there many, many times. This, of course, begs the question of witchcraft, which of course it was, for what else could it be? The occupant of the cottage was someone often referred to as a forest witch, but her friends simply know her as Amaryllis. She has brightly colored hair that changed between violet, teal, and emerald green in the flickering firelight from her hearth. The witch stands at an average height of 5.5 feet tall, with a wiry frame deceptive of her true strength. Her hazel eyes glow golden for a few seconds as she wordlessly warms her teacup back to the proper temperature and takes a sip of raspberry tea. She slips a hand into her pants pocket and withdraws a crushed wildflower. Amaryllis whispers into her cupped palm, eyes glowing again, and the wildflower springs back into fullness as she sets it in a large flower pot full of nutrient-rich earth near a window. Her familiar was curled up in his bed next her chair, a low rumble emanating from him as he slept. She bends down and runs a hand along the scales on his side in a moment of affection for her little dragon, Erefi. He'd been with her since she was 3, when she found him stuck and bleeding in a thicket of brambles. She freed him and then brought him home to her parents' house and cleaned him up with the intention of releasing him back into the forest near where she had found him. Her parents, however, had different ideas, considering they knew much more about what it meant for her to find this creature. She was told he was destined to be her familiar and be with her for the rest of her days. Amaryllis, being 3, did not fully understand what his companionship would mean to her, but now, 20 years later, they had been through much together. She gives him one last pet before rising and stretching, enjoying the pops and cracks of her joints resetting after a long day of working. As she goes to settle into her favorite chair by the hearth, she hears a gentle knock on her front door. Slightly perplexed as she checks the late hour on the digital clock above the oven her friends insisted she have, she rises and opens the door a crack to get a visual on her caller. Amaryllis lets out a squeal when she sees that it is her friend, Marcella, laden with a canvas bag full of chocolate and other treats that Amaryllis loves. Come in, Marcella, she exclaims, hugging her excitedly once she'd stepped through the doorway. I didn't think you were coming over tomorrow because you were hung up at work. She sets her goodies on Amaryllis's kitchen table and replies, I ended up getting my project done sooner than expected thanks to a friendly environmental policy guy who practically leapt at the chance to get back in the tab. Amaryllis hands Marcella a mug of her favorite jasmine tea and settles into her armchair again, waving a hand over her teacup to warm hers back up to temperature. Is this the same guy who drafted that bill to protect chemists and potioneers from having their creations stolen by the other a few years back when he was only like 20? Marcella nods her head. Yes, his name is Percival, and I'm very thankful for getting out of my PhD program now rather than later a few years back, when that wasn't illegal to do yet. She sips her tea and moves to stand next to the low burning fire. Have you thought about my offer yet, Amory? At the mention of this topic once again, Amaryllis stiffens, and Erefi stirs awake, sensing the tension in his witch. She knows Marcella is only being a friend, but she can't help the feeling of guilt that seeps into her stomach. Marcella had done much for her already after her parents passed 4 years back. She would feel wrong taking advantage of her kindness again so soon. Erefi jumps lightly into Amaryllis's lap, careful not to snag his claws on her clothes, and gives Marcella one of his withering looks. She sticks her tongue out at the little dragon in response and refocuses her attention on Amaryllis. Well, I know you hate to owe people or whatever, but I think you deserve to do so much more. You can pay me back once you have a steadier income from being a veterinarian like you've wanted to do since we were kids, Marcella continues. Amaryllis says, I understand where you're coming from, Mir. I do. But it's just not the right time yet. I'll get my vet license when I have the money and the time. I help the creatures that come to my door here, and their gratitude is more than enough right now. Marcella finishes her cup of tea and responds, Okay, I'll stop bothering you about it for now. She sets her mug down. And I know I can always come to you if my cat is having issues again, and to just pay you in chocolate. They both laugh at that statement, and the tension in the cottage dissipates easily. Arafi nips gently at Amaryllis's finger, letting her know that he's hungry after some time goes by while the two women have been chatting. Well, all right, I guess you should have dinner now, Amaryllis says, lifting him from her lap and putting him on the floor. She stands and opens his mini door next to Marcella's chair and puts a magical timer on it for 45 minutes to ensure he's back before she wants to sleep. Seeing Marcella's empty mug, she waves her hand and levitates it to the kitchen, where she quickly brews another mug full of jasmine tea and sends it back to Marcella. Amaryllis then decides she's a little hungry as well, and nabs the last two pieces of cake from her fridge for them to eat. The pair stay up another 2 hours eating and talking, enjoying a nice evening off of work and stress of the glittering city nearby. When Arafi returns from catching his dinner, he leaps up into Marcella's lap, much to her delight. She spends 30 minutes scratching him in all the places he can't reach very well. He snuggles into her lap more securely as he tires, and dozes off just before Marcella does as well. Amaryllis slowly lifts the sleeping Arafi from Marcella's lap and puts him into bed, tucking his tiny blanket over him. She gently taps Marcella's shoulder to wake her. Here, it's pretty late now. You want to just stay here, or will you be fine to go home? She asks. Marcella rubs the sleep from her eyes and answers, No, I think I'll be okay to go home. Could you cast a protective charm for me, though? Amaryllis does as asked and stays looking out her front door until she can no longer see Marcella's retreating form in the darkness of the forest. Then she does her nightly tidying up in the kitchen, rinsing the mugs and setting them in the dish rack to dry overnight. She banks the fire to keep it from going out overnight and whispers a spell over it to keep the smoke moving upwards. Finally, she crawls into her bed and reflects on her day and evening with Marcella before falling into a dreamless sleep. Maybe someday soon she'll be able to do a job she truly loves and feel more comfortable spending time in the metallic city, away from her cozy forest cottage. So, once again, that was The Forest Cottage by MadiMalfoy, aka Maddie. That is posted on our archive at hpfanfictalk.com and was written for another of our member, Thea's challenge called the Narrative Original Fiction Challenge. And as promised, we have got Maddie here with us. Maddie, how are you doing?
Doing great.
I know I butchered a lot of the reading. Unfortunately, I had to take my glasses off for the glare. So I apologize for that.
You did fine.
But the first question I wanted to ask is, why choose this setting for the story?
Well, I had actually previously talked to Nim or Thea about my ideas, just like generally speaking, for the original fiction world that it's set in. And she was like, you should enter in my challenge because this will help you really get started on it. And I was like, okay, but I didn't really have my main character, Marcella, fleshed out quite yet. So it's like, I'll write a little bit more about Amaryllis and just kind of her, so she's Marcella's best friend, kind of flesh her backstory out a little bit. And then maybe that'll kickstart me into actually like planning my novel out better. And I just thought, a forest cottage is always kind of nice thing to write about. I just wanted to make it my own, kind of with this setting.
Well, I think that was definitely successful. how has the success come with writing this novel centered around Marcella after the story?
Now I might be changing my mind. It might be centered around Amaryllis. I haven't really had a chance to dive into like more planning yet because I just started grad school. So I've been busy with that. But I may or may not change my main character to be Amaryllis and not Marcella. So I don't know yet.
Well, it always strikes when you write the one shot with the side character, I think. So you're in good company there. One of the things that definitely stuck out to me too was the descriptions, both of the outside of the cottage, as well as kind of through her interactions with Marcella, the inside of the cottage, of course. What helps you write those descriptions so well?
So normally I'm really, really bad at writing descriptions. I tend to be very dialogue heavy. And one of the requirements for this challenge was that your piece had to be 70% narration and less than 30% dialogue. So I've really just had to sit down and not write dialogue. And that's really how I kind of crafted all of my descriptions for this piece, because it's like I can't have them talking. It has to just be describing what's happening. So I think I wanted to kind of do like, it's kind of ethereal, but just also it's a forest. Like I wanted to describe the forest setting and how it's adjacent to this city that I'm not describing in great detail yet, because that's going to come later.
And did you feel like that that helped in other writing that you've done?
I would like to think so, but I have not written nearly as much as I should have this month. I wanted to be done with a couple of chapters of my two like multi-chap stories that I have up that are in like that I'm actually currently writing, and I have not finished either of those chapters. So it's like I want it to help, but I think it has helped a little bit, but I haven't had the chance to really post much with better writing yet.
Well, you're obviously got a lot going on with transitioning into grad school and everything. What was behind the development of Amaryllis as this witch, as opposed to it is? Well, let me ask this first: is Marcella, I'm assuming, is non-magical? Is that correct?
That is actually not correct. So
Oh man.
the way that I think about it is, so you can be, it's kind of like in Harry Potter, how you can like have half bloods and full bloods and that kind of a thing. But with my world, it's just, you can have like, you know, you're good at healing spells, or you're good at like housework spells, or you're just good at magic in general. So Marcella has a little bit of magic, but it's more to do with like the potion side of things. Like she just is very, really good at chemistry and really, really good at potions. Whereas Amaryllis is just, she's straight up born a witch. So that's kind of her shebang. But Marcella can do more things than she thinks she can, but that's a plot line I have to develop still.
Gotcha. One of the other things that kind of stuck out to me is we often envision, I think, like everywhere in fiction, that dragons are like these giant beasts after their babies. But Amaryllis's dragon, hopefully I got its name right, Arafi, stays like small enough to be in somebody's lap.
Yeah, he's like a mid-sized dog. Because like, you know, when in like mythology or like fables and fairy tales, with whenever witches have familiars, they're usually pretty small. Like it's usually a cat or an owl. So it's like I wanted it to be a dragon because I love dragons. And I want that to be in my story, but I also don't want them to be just a huge, terrifying creature. I want them also to have the option of being these really small ones. So really kind of I want that range of like regular knowledge of dragons, and also like here's my new version of a dragon. That's why I like having Araf in there.
Do they have the same sort of I guess fearsome abilities? Are they fire breathers, or how are they completely different in your world, I guess?
I haven't really decided yet for those besides Araf, but he's a bit familiar, right? So he can like sense other people's emotions, especially Amaryllis's. And I think in my notes somewhere I have something about him having something that he can do with, I think, like foresty, like, so he's like earth. He's like an earth kind of dragon.
Gotcha. Um, well, do you have anything that you would like to share about your upcoming works that you are trying to get going on once you get everything settled?
Well, I guess I did just post a one shot for Rumpelstiltskin that when she made the prefect fake list for the Interhouse Camaraderie Challenge for the opener, she put me. I wrote her a one shot that just got validated today. I tried to write it spooky, and it's not very spooky, but it features a needle, so that's kind of fun.
Does it feature a haystack as well?
No, it does
not. So that kind of leads us to another question, just generally about your involvement on our forums. You are a Ravenclaw. What would you consider to be your favorite thing or favorite feedback that you can get from your fellow claws in the ivory tower?
I don't know. Like, it's like I'm an editor for the Ivory Tower, so it's just kind of cool to be able to see what everyone's been doing regarding, like, if they're posting stuff on the archives or if they're just having a good time in all of our game threads that we have in the tower. And we also have this thing called the Blue vs. Bronze review battle. So that's where we review each other's stories. I mean, we compete in a very, very friendly manner. Blue or Team Bronze, and that's really fun to do. I don't know. Feedback wise, for me, I just like if people just read it. Like, I don't even like, reviews are great, but like if you just read it and tell me you liked it, I'm so happy. That's just the best, that people are actually reading my work.
Well, I really appreciate you joining us. It's always good to have our authors with us, I feel like, so that we can actually get a little more insight into the story. I know I learned a ton about the story, some of which I would not have expected. But I think the descriptions, everything, I don't know if the results of the challenge have come out because I have been a little bit lackadaisical in my participation in like modding since I switched over to Gamekeeper, and I feel like I keep getting ninja'd on there. But it definitely seems like a great story, even if it's a big departure from dialogue heavy stories. I think most people probably would not be able to tell. So thank you very much for sharing it with us. Thank you for being here for the Q&A and answering my questions. And we are at this point going to jump into our second story of the double feature, which feel free to listen, especially if you've read it, because we may be able to get some outside perspective, or feel free, of course, to pop off to whatever else you may need to do.
So, and I did read this. I was very excited when I read it, and that I was tied with her for this. So.
All right. Well, if you are free to hang around, we would certainly love your feedback on No Mercy as well, so we can kind of bounce some additional thoughts on it out to the masses. This story again is No Mercy. It was written by Starbuck, who is one of the members of Slytherin House on our forums, and it was also written for a challenge too, which was the vocational challenge by Sapphic Sunrise. And I don't believe that one has been judged yet either, but don't quote me on that. I think both wrapped up pretty frequently, or pretty recently, sorry. But I do know that this was also chosen as the Slytherin Story of the Month back in July of 2018. So it's been a participant in a number of challenges or nominations, which take place on our forums. Without me rambling anymore about it, I am going to go ahead and read the story, starting now. Under the cover of darkness, we approached the island. The storm was raging all around us, the ocean a black hole beneath, the danger of falling off a broom real. Wands at the ready, only able to fly holding on with one hand, burdened by our gear. It was a wonder we were even airborne. In the distance, I could hear a scream. One of the other squads got hit. I could feel my dog tags searing my skin, a sure sign of someone dying, their death a permanent mark on our bodies. I could only hope it wasn't her. But you don't have time to dwell on those things during an op. I ignored it. With all four of us flying under the disillusionment charm, I couldn't see the others. But I knew where they were. Jupiter on my right, most likely cursing under his breath. Mars on my left, saying a prayer for the fallen. Nox in front of me, our leader, dauntless in her glory, merciless in her craft. This wasn't our first Black Ops mission, and it won't be the last if we survive the night. Landing quietly, our feet touching the muddy grass, we shrank our brooms and ran towards the pitiful cover of a nearby ruin. Nox removed the disillusionment charm. Her slender hands had killed more men than I could count. Jupiter's dark blonde hair was slicked back and the scar on his face fully visible. The fact that just a few nights ago he was shagging my sister played in the back of my mind. I ignored it. Mars, towering above us, had the saddest eyes you could imagine. The oldest in our squad, he'd seen things the rest of us only heard about through the grapevine. And he had done them, too. His call sign was fitting. We're coming in from the north side of the castle. The intel says there are going to be at least 10 guards stationed there. Don't count on backup, Nox said as she squinted through the binoculars, knowing we all felt the burning. Remember, we're supposed to arrest the mark. With the others, the policy is no mercy. No mercy, we said in unison, wands at the ready. Jupiter's face was drained of all color, but his eyes were cold and determined. This was personal for him. Nox started running from cover to cover, the rest of us falling into formation behind her. No words were needed. I could see dark shapes walking on top of the battlements, against the fires they had burning. More screams, screams from children, children burning. The smell of burnt flesh made my stomach turn. I ignored it. No shield was there, nothing to stop us. The path to the castle gates clear, the guards distracted. Nox stopped dead in her tracks as she realized the same thing we all did. Bad intel. Treason. A trap. We formed a circle, our backs against each other. Shadows were forming around us, making the night even darker. Dog tags burning again. Another one fallen. I ignored it. Closing my eyes for a moment, I inhaled, cleared my mind of everything but my purpose. No mercy. As I opened my eyes, the shadows were people. A moment of stillness, the calm before the storm. But the storm was already here. People became marks. The marks were everywhere around us, completely surrounded. Not ideal. We're fucked, I whispered, mostly to myself. Mars grunted something unintelligible. As if we were of one mind, our curses started flying. Red and green and blue all mixing together. There were too many, closing in on us. I was panting, my wand still shooting curses, the goblin-made sword Jupiter wore strapped to his back poking me. A curse hit me in the leg, my magic shield crumbling, the pain deep. I ignored it. We're splitting up, Nox yelled from behind me. Take out your weapons. My mouth formed into a diabolical smile. The time to paint the world red had come. In between shouting, I heard Jupiter's sword leaving its sheath. Mars was already out there, a long sword in one hand, wand in the other. To look at him was to look at the god of death, come to take his due. He was beautiful. Nox was a blur, her speed otherworldly, her dagger stabbing and maiming and killing. In the blink of an eye, I was upon the nearest mark, his neck torn in my savage rage. The green light from my wand killing another one. Dodging a curse, I slipped. It was a lucky slip. The place where my head was just moments before was burning green. I cast another shield. Too many curses hit it at once. It collapsed. I couldn't see the others. The marks were all around me. Running towards a nearby tree for cover, I shot curses behind me. I reached the tree. A moment of reprieve. There was blood in my eyes. Catching my breath, I could feel the pain all over my body. I ignored it. The tree started burning just as I poked my head around it. Jupiter was in the midst of a duel. The arm holding his sword was severely bleeding. Another burst of rage pushed me into action. He saw me coming, and a smirk made its way onto his face. I stabbed the mark in the back. She crumbled before me. "Nice one, Apollo," Jupiter yelled as his wand shot green, killing a mark who nearly chopped my arm off. I turned around, looking for Nox and Mars. I wished I didn't. Nox was fighting 5 marks on her own. She was yelling. I couldn't hear the words, just the screams. But Mars was surrounded. No way out. And he only had his wand. His sword arm was cursed off before my eyes. An earth-shattering scream. My scream. Blood pouring out of the arm. Mars going down. Nox saw but couldn't do anything. Dog tags scorched my skin like never before. I didn't ignore it. The world went red before my eyes. I was 18 and on my first op. A Neo-Death Eater group needed to be dealt with. Just a rookie with too much to prove. And the god of death, my mentor. Mars. No, not Mars. Ragnar. A killing curse coming my way. Ragnar pushing me out of the way, almost being hit himself. I couldn't fathom the sacrifice he was willing to make. For me. I was 19 and back to back with Ragnar. Curses flying left and right. The two of us dodging, moving like one person. I cursed my mark, another one coming toward me, wand raised. But Ragnar yelled, a knife in his side. Not serious, but it hurt. I stayed with him. Another knife was flying towards him. I stepped in front of it, the shield I would cast holding. I understood the sacrifice now. I was 24 and saw Ragnar dying. We were brothers, brothers in arms. I was still screaming, my wand shooting curses at everything around me, my knife stabbing whatever was nearest. It didn't matter. What surrounded me were just marks. Revenge was the only thing on my mind. Hacking and slashing, dueling like never before, blood everywhere around me, my arms, my body, covered in blood. The world was red and I wanted to bathe in it. Looking up from my bloody hands, I saw the mark that killed Ragnar. Death was going to be a mercy after what I had in mind. Crucio! I yelled, and he screamed. The most excruciating pain was racing through him. I laughed at the pain. His screams were like the sweetest music. I don't know how long I tortured him. Apollo, stop! Jupiter was shaking me. Dawn was breaking. Nox was looking at the carnage we caused with a blank expression on her face. She turned her eyes towards me. She understood. We need to get moving. She's not amongst the dead, probably holed up in the castle. I nodded. Ragnar's body was contorted. His eyes were open and looking at me, the saddest eyes you could imagine. There were tears in my eyes. I didn't realize I was crying. Jupiter and Nox put their hands on my shoulders. It was no comfort, but they were here for me. We walked towards the castle gates. I opened them and was met by dead Muggle children, half burned. The rain I never noticed during the bloodbath put out the fires. Fucking crazy, the lengths one would go to for their beliefs. Entering the castle, we were engulfed in darkness. Lumos, Jupiter's wand, lit up. I only now noticed we were all covered in blood. Even our faces, our clothes were soaked in it. We were death's instruments, and Ragnar was her finest. There was crunching under our boots. I looked down only to see two small skeletons falling apart under us. It wasn't hard to find Octavia Hawthorne. The dark-haired witch was lounging in what used to be a throne room before she took the island and the castle for herself. "You going to arrest me?" she asked. Her tone was unconcerned. "Please, feel free to do so. I won't even see the insides of Azkaban." She was right. The rich and the powerful always had ways to avoid justice. And Octavia Hawthorne, as far as most of the wizarding world was concerned, was a respected member of the community. A philanthropist. A philanthropist who experimented on and tortured Muggle children, orphans. A philanthropist who was responsible for Ragnar's death. A philanthropist who took Jupiter's sister under her wing. Jupiter's sister died last year. Another experiment. Gone wrong. The death that started our investigation. A philanthropist who brainwashed her followers using both torture and the Imperious Curse. I looked at my fellow hit wizards. Jupiter was trembling from fury. Nox was calm. She was always calm. I say we tell them she resisted arrest. Nox took a step towards Octavia as she said this. I didn't even wait for her to finish the sentence. With the magical protection charms down, I apparated behind Octavia and slit her throat in one clean sweep of my knife. No mercy. I carried Ragnar's body back to the headquarters, took his dog tags and put them around my own neck. My friend, my brother. I loved him too, Logan said as we sat down sharing a bottle of fire whiskey in front of Ragnar's body, staring into nothingness. Afterward, I was in the shower, washing all the blood and sweat and mud from my body. She entered the shower stall and snaked her arms around me. "You're alive," I whispered. She looked up at me, her gray eyes staring into my own. She touched the scarred skin beneath my neck. "I am. Ethan, I'm sorry about Mars." I had no words to say. I said what I wanted when I soaked the muddy grass of the island with the blood of my enemies. No mercy. So, as you heard a few times throughout the story, and the inspiration for the title was No Mercy by Starbuck, and we will get to one of the things I found interesting about the story in just a second. Unfortunately, due to time zones, Chris was not able to be with us for a live Q&A, but I was able to ask her a handful of questions beforehand, and I'm going to read those questions as sort of makes sense without her here, and then I will read her answers. And then we will jump back to Maddie and get her thoughts on the story. So one of the things that I thought Chris did an excellent job of was describing a truly chaotic battle. And of course, naturally, I wanted her to reveal her secrets to all of our viewers. And this is her response. I read a lot of action-packed books, most recently the books by Joe Abercrombie and the Red Rising saga by Pierce Brown. Both writers are superb, she says, and she would definitely recommend reading their books to anyone. She knows some people skim over the battle scenes because they can be hard to keep track of. but Chris has always loved imagining how they play out while reading. So she figured she managed to pick up something along the way. What she does find helpful when writing a battle scene is to pause now and then and backtrack through what's been written to actually see if it's easy to follow. With another thing being controlling how many things the narrator can follow during the battle. Obviously, there's no way a person would be able to describe everything that's happening, which is why the sentences during the battle scenes are quite short. That's something I tried to capture. I don't know how successful I was with it, but hopefully you were able to hear that kind of rhythm of things. She noted that sometimes, of course, with that, they're only telling a small part of the bigger picture, like mentioning dog tags burning again, which is describing a feeling, but the bigger meaning is that another hit wizard died through the implications of that the narrator can't properly deal with during the actual battle, which, of course, I think we can see through the repeated use of I ignored it on some of those sections. The next question I asked her was about all the hit wizards having code names and whether they chose their own or were assigned, and if assigned, how that happens exactly. She loves code name call signs, as you might have gathered from her name, or her username rather. She is a huge Battlestar Galactica fan. And that was what inspired her to even use call signs at all, allowing them to distinguish the person from being a hit wizard in action and a regular person when not in action. As many people know, call signs are also used in the military. And as far as she knows, which I believe is true, they are assigned. And so they get assigned by fellow hit wizards shortly after or during their first mission, sometimes even during training. Chris says the ones she chose are usually somehow related to the person, not always, and the naming of the four in her story ended up absolutely accidentally fitting them. For example, you could say Ethan Jones / Apollo from No Mercy probably got his on account of being good looking. In part, this would have been a teasing call sign, which they sometimes are. Ragnar / Mars is already explained a bit in the story. Obviously, we hear those explanations from Ethan / Apollo. Nox, the Roman version of Nyx, is a shadowy figure, while Logan Anderson, aka Jupiter, is a fairly new recruit. That was not mentioned in the story, obviously, but both he and Ethan Jones are also characters from another story that Chris has written, The Art of Being Nonchalant or Not, whose sister sparked the whole investigation. And he's branded with the name Jupiter because he's a protecting hero, kind of, who wants to avenge his sister, and most likely took an oath to do so, his friends naming him Jupiter in a somewhat teasing way because he was new and didn't exactly know what he was saying. Why Greek and Roman gods? Honestly, she said it's because she's most familiar with them and wrote No Mercy in one sitting. Yes, one sitting, if you can believe it, without prior research or anything. So it was the easiest way to incorporate them without having to stop writing and researching other mythologies. But she said the call signs could come from any mythology or even have no relation, but be called something else that describes the person or their personality. I then asked, and this was kind of based on my reading of it, that she did a great job kind of making the job of violence obvious, while keeping, the specific targets less so until the end, and why. So she noted that she went with the villain being revealed at the end, with the story starting basically in the midst of the action with the narrator not really having time to actually think about anything except the next immediate step he and his team have to do in order to carry out their mission. Also, like I did about this, she liked to keep a bit of mystery, keeping everybody wondering what was happening and why, and who was really responsible for not just the bloodbath of battle, but the horrifying scenes that lay behind it that were mentioned throughout the story. One of the other things that I asked, kind of in the vein with the code names / call signs, was whether she viewed the use of dog tags as being kind of ported from the Muggle world, or whether perhaps the Muggle world had somehow ported them from the magical world, and the reasoning behind them being included. He acknowledged that he had not really thought about who used dog tags first, but thought that perhaps they were developed in both worlds simultaneously, because the first mention of dog tags is in Spartan times, signifying once again that Chris knows way more about history than I do. She wanted to include something that tied the group of hit wizards together, and found the dog tags and the way that they function, of course, being partly inspired by the dark mark and the charmed galleons that the DA used. The mark they leave when someone dies is a way for them to remember the fallen, to never forget them, why they died, and to spur them into action. She acknowledges that anyone who heard or read the story has to, that they were a bit dark, having something that burns when someone dies, but for some reason, the way they work came into her mind while she was writing it, and it seemed to fit with the story somewhat basically naturally. Finally, I asked her about its inspiration. It was inspired, of course, by the vocational challenge held on our forums by another member, Sapphic Sunrise. And I asked her what specifically drew her to the job of hit wizards. Chris wanted to explore how in the future, after Voldemort was defeated, the Ministry might actually set up things in a way that doesn't leave them twiddling their thumbs if another dark wizard or witch starts gaining power. And she also thought that they should work in secret, at least part of hit wizards being sort of secretive, as is revealed in canon, against those who had criminal ideas, because, well, in her interpretation, who doesn't want a kind of spy Black Ops theme group with wands and goblin-made weapons? Which I think, coming out of the Department of Mysteries to hit wizards, all kinds of things like that, I think I can definitely agree with. Or, as she said, or is that just me? I guess in this case, us. I believe that we still have Maddie with us. So I want to kind of jump in before I give any breakdown thoughts and say, you said you read the story. What were your initial impressions?
I haven't read anything really as dark or violent as this in a long, long time. I haven't done a lot of reading really recently anyway. But I thought that Chris did a fantastic job, like you said, with the battle scene. Because sometimes, authors will go into very, very gory detail, and I don't really enjoy that because I'm like, I don't need that visual in my head. But the way that Chris wrote it, it made a lot of sense because, when you are in that kind of adrenaline-fueled state, you're not going to be able to focus on every single little thing that's happening. So I think that was really, really well done. And I just really liked the whole concept too. I think hit wizards are really neat. I'm not going to write anything about them, but I think that's such a cool concept. Like, because you don't really even think about it because you really only think about, aurors. And now that these people are hit wizards, like a subset of aurors, are they an entirely different department? Where do they fit in with the current canon verse of Ministry of Magic officials?
What did you think about the challenge itself? Did you participate?
Yes, I did. I have it's 3 chapters right now. It's a short story about Sybil Trelawney before she goes to Hogwarts as a teacher. It's just about after she's graduated and she's running a little shop that sells like souvenir items, but also does like tea readings and all of that good seer stuff. Um, so it was more like, actually I started writing it back on HBFF because Pixley Ann and she requested it for me way back when, and I'm still writing it. But I really like the idea of the challenge too, because it's kind of a different thing. Like, oh, you think, you just kind of like assume a character has a job, but when you're meant to write just about that job in specificity, I think it creates a better challenge for us as writers to kind of expand on our characters' personalities and life stories.
What in going back to No Mercy specifically, what was your favorite sort of minor character, I guess we would say, in the squad that we see?
Probably Nox, because I love a good, powerful woman, and she's got daggers, and I think that's just pretty great.
Well, I will kind of offer some thoughts before we close up. Obviously, some of them are revealed in my questions, but I just thought No Mercy was an incredible story. No surprise that it won Story of the Month in Slytherin House at all, because I think it's really hard, as Maddie was saying, to write not just the action scenes in the middle of multi-character battles, but also to write a story that reveals honestly horrific details. I meant to kind of warn the faint of heart before I read, but obviously forgot. But it does it in a way that is not too graphic, I don't think, at least in the moment. We don't actually see the most horrific deaths taking place. And so I thought it was handled very very deftly, I guess is maybe the word. And one of the things that I also really enjoyed, and maybe this is kind of creepy, but I enjoyed the reveal of the villain, not just because of how we didn't know it throughout the story, which I obviously enjoyed as well. But I also really enjoyed it because we saw someone who pretends to be something good, um, actually being quite evil behind the scenes. And I don't know if this was intentional or not. Unfortunately, I don't have Chris with us for me to follow up. It's a question I wish I'd asked in written form. But I thought it was also interesting, and there are a lot of stories that portray in this kind of next generation, after the Second Wizarding War, that put all of these canon characters, especially wealthy characters, into these like philanthropic sort of roles, for various reasons. Maybe they're viewed as unhireable because of their heritage and connection to Voldemort during the war, or that's just what they chose to do, and to kind of take that and completely pervert it into not an alternate identity exactly, because we don't get that, but something that someone to the outer world seems to be this perfect benevolent person, doing dark and twisted things, rising up as a potential next sort of dark witch, that could have, but for, as Chris said, but for the job of the Hit Wizards, maybe putting a stop to it before it could become more, with these followers of hers who still seem to espouse very dark beliefs. One more time, I want to thank Chris for sharing her story with us. I want to thank her for taking the time to answer my written questions, which I put her under a bit of a time crunch to do, especially given the time zones. Thank you again, Maddie, for being with us, and especially for staying the whole time to give your thoughts on the second story in our double feature. I want to give a congratulations to both Maddie and to Chris for being selected by their peers as the stories to be featured on Fic Night. If you want to read the stories for yourself, as always, links are in the description. And if you want to check out more stories by these authors or other members of our community, if you want to check out the challenges that these stories were entered in, go ahead and go to our forums at hpfanfictalk.com. Sign up, join our community, and check this stuff out. If you're a fanfic author, dive right in. And if you liked Fic Night and you'd like to hear more stories like this in the future, we do this every month. So just subscribe to our channel, and even though we read these live, you will get updates once they actually get uploaded to our channel shortly. So congratulations to all participants. Congratulations to our 2 featured authors. And that is September Fic Night, signing off.